From the Oregon State University Extension Service, this is PolliNation, a podcast that tells the stories of researchers, land managers, and concerned citizens making bold strides to improve the health of pollinators. I'm your host, Dr. Adoni Melithopoulos, Assistant Professor in Pollinator Health in the Department of Horticulture. Never did I ever think that there would be a podcast that I would be hosting that would reach 200 episodes. And in fact, that's where we're at, the 200th episode. I look back to 2017, May, our first episode with Francis Ratnieks, and thought, maybe the show would go on for a year. We'll see how it goes. But over the last couple of years and 200 episodes, I've met some wonderful guests. I've learned a lot. And I've also had the great opportunity to meet all of you. Well, not all of you, but I've gotten emails from you. I've met you at conferences, encountered you on social media. It's been really wonderful. This has been a great experience for me. And I thought, how to mark this anniversary? My idea is I'm going to take you up the stairs to the fourth floor of the Ag Life Science building where my program is housed, the Pollinator Health Program, and introduce you to four people who have really transformed my life over the last few years. The Pollinator Health Program started 5 years ago, and over time there have been new people added to the program. Started with Jen Larson, Sarah Kincaid, Lincoln Best, and most recently in our office we've had the opportunity to host Dr. Michael Burgett, who is emeritus faculty. All four of these people we've had on previous shows. They're the hothouse that give me all the great ideas, and they've made the last 5 years of my life the best working years I've ever had. So this episode, we're going to go in, we're going to talk about the Pollinator Health Program, where it started, our memories of it, and where we think it's going. And along those lines, I just want to remind you from last week, we have from now to January 15th, we're fundraising for the Oregon Bee Atlas. You can make a contribution to its 501c3, so it's tax deductible, to help us identify some strange and crazy bees here in Oregon. So I'll put the link on how you can donate below, but without further ado, let's go up the stairs to the fourth floor to meet the Pollinator Health Lab this week on PolliNation. Okay, so I thought this would be a great occasion for a podcast. It's 200 episodes. We're coming up on this program being past 5 years old, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, 5 years old. So we've kind of reached a milestone. And, I thought it'd be a good chance for everybody to get to know the behind the scenes, what's underneath the hood of the program, and also just what we're kind of have in mind for the future. And I guess what I want to ask you all is, what were you doing before you joined this team? I know, for me, I was in Lethbridge. I was in Lethbridge, Alberta. We've had Shelley Hoover on previous episodes, and I was a postdoc working on canola pollination down in southern Alberta. But where were the rest of you, before you came here?
I had taken about an 8-year break from working in general to raise my kids. And then back in a previous life, I was a landscape architect. I'm from Florida, and so my first love was plants. But
your first plant was plant?
My first love were plants.
Isn't it still?
And it still is plants, yes. Yes, I'm a plant person for sure. And so I worked in landscape architecture for several years, and it seems unrelated, but actually the skills that I learned in project management in the field of architecture have translated directly to my job now.
You also ran a beekeeping supply company.
I did. So I got into bees. So something about me is that I don't dip my toes into new hobbies. I jump in passionately. And so not only did I start keeping honeybees, I started a company here in town with a couple friends selling beekeeping supplies. We sold our company eventually to Chenard's Nursery, and then I took this job here.
Well, Sarah, what about you? You sort of have the longest roots in pollinators in our little group in Oregon in many ways. What were you doing? What were you doing before you joined the team? Because in some ways, what you were doing before you joined the team kind of shaped the team.
Yeah, I did. So I am a graduate of Oregon State University. Actually, I got my master's here, maybe I can't remember the year, but maybe 10 years ago now or so. And I got a master's, and I was working with bumblebees in the Pacific Northwest for that research. And after that, I did a stint with the Oregon Department of Agriculture, where I was hired on there after school to finish up a native bee survey in croplands throughout the state.
Everybody knows these postcards, these Bees to Oregon postcard. That was part of that study. You went through and found these bees on farms.
Yep, and all those images came out of funding from that study itself. But when that study was over, I was hired on essentially to become the manager, well, not the manager, but the head of the Eugene Field Office. The ODA has various, or did until recently, have various offices throughout the state, which is really part of their network of insect trapping teams that they have. The main purpose of the group that I was part of, which was the Insect Pest Prevention and Management Program, was really to monitor the state for invasive species. So my primary roles before I left the ODA was actually kind of leading a team of insect trappers who were sent out throughout the state to monitor for different pest species. But in addition to that, I also continued bee work kind of on the side, which is where I met you. I helped found the Oregon Bee Project, and then had long dreamed of starting an Oregon Bee Atlas. I am an ideas person. I've had many ideas and throughout my time, and I always thought it would be great to start kind of a volunteer-led survey of native bees. And I was so excited when I met you because I got you to adopt all my crazy ideas that no one would consider previously. So, yeah.
They're all good ideas. And the other thing I was going to say about you is, in some ways, you're kind of the connection to the past, because at Oregon State University there were people, Andy Moldenke, for example, Sajai Rao, but also Bill Stevens, and you kind of you're the only one of us who overlapped with that generation, kind of in your previous work.
Yes, yeah, it was my pleasure when I was here during graduate school actually to get to work with some of these researchers, especially Bill Stevens, who has since passed away, and I learned an incredible amount from those individuals. So I was really lucky to kind of still be here when the old guard was still in operation. Yeah.
Well, Bill Stevens is a good example of Canadians from Saskatchewan, and I guess, Link, that's where you come in as another fellow Canadian. We needed to increase what we call in Canada the CanCon content.
Yeah, right. Mandated.
What you were doing, and in some ways, I think I met you in a number of places, at the University of Calgary when I was working with Ralph Carter, but also just, anywhere you turned in Western Canada, you were there. I think Sarah took a course with you, so you were doing a lot of things before you got here.
Yeah, what was I doing before I joined the Pollinator Health team? Well, officially I joined the team just last year in March in 2020, but I had been coming down here for a few years contracting to do identification and teaching and the usual kinds of things. But before I was here, I was spending my falls at the University of Calgary with Paul Galpern's Ecologics Lab, which was a really awesome experience. And I was spending the remainder of my year usually working on my own grants and then running courses, as well as providing taxonomic services as I do. So those things were keeping me really busy throughout Western Canada, and I feel very fortunate that I've been able to work with so many people and in so many places.
Anybody who gets to know you knows that it goes way farther back. We've all heard over beers crazy stories of flying airplanes through gorges in Central Asia. You've been doing native bee work far beyond the time that you were working. I think you described it like you've been doing it since you were really young. Like your yearbook photo has...
Yeah, right. So my 6th grade yearbook photo said that I wanted to be a zoologist and something else along those lines. And so that's kind of worked out, I think, ultimately. But for sure, I've always, since early childhood, I've always had a deep fascination just with natural history. And so whether it's, shiny rocks, plants or animals, it's just like I'm just curious about all of those things. And so as a child, my parents did encourage me to make an insect collection, which in the mid-'80s included bumblebees. And so there are specimens that I've collected, over 30 years ago. And it kind of, I would say, picked back up during my undergrad years, and then just kind of continued to escalate. And here we are.
All right, so I've written some questions on the board. If you walk into our office, we've got this brand new office. It's got Mike Burgett, a former guest, on the end, and then Sarah's there, Link's there. Jen has her own alcove with all the extension publications. It's beautiful, just down the hallway from here. But we have all these boards in here just trying to keep track of all the projects we're doing. And I've written on the board some questions for our podcast. And I guess I'm going to skip over 2 questions and just go to number 4 of what's your proudest achievement? Or what do you consider sort of I guess I'm going to change this a little bit. What do you think the Pollinator Health Program has accomplished, in the last 5 years? What has been, in your mind, when you look back at all that we've done and all that you've done personally in the program, what are sort of the moments that, come to mind? And I have to say, for me, it's bringing all you together. Having you as a team here has been just, I never in my wildest dream. Sarah visited me early on. It was an empty office, and the thing was like, what are you going to do? I never imagined I'd be sitting around this table with you guys. But what do you guys see as sort of the program's strengths, and what have you been proud to accomplish personally within the program?
Okay, I'll start. This is Jen. I would say the proudest thing for me to watch and participate in has been the creation of the Master Melittologist program, because when I started with you at the beginning, my job with you was sort of undefined, which,
remember,
if anyone knows Adoni, means that could mean anything. The job description includes anything and everything. So it's no small task to create an educational program from scratch. I also worked for the Master Beekeeper program, but I jumped into an existing program with that job. So to be part of the formation of the educational program from the ground up has been, I think, my proudest achievement and what I've enjoyed watching the most.
And I think we've drawn a lot. Your experience with Master Beekeepers we've in some ways paralleled the program, like the idea of like multiple levels in the Master Melittologist program.
Yes.
Is modeled off of Master Beekeepers. That experience has been really key to us trying to think about how to conceptualize this program.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm.
Also, I imagine the other thing is that people. I think we've had you on an episode years ago about Master Beekeepers.
Yes.
It's a huge program.
It is. It's really grown. We span Oregon into Idaho and Washington State, and even some people further afield. So yeah, we're kind of 5 to 10 years ahead of where the Master Melittologist program is, so I can better forecast some pitfalls and things to avoid, and also some things to really highlight and strive for. So.
What about you? What's been your...
Yeah, I'd say my proudest achievements also kind of center around the Master Melittologist program, and it's actually not so much my achievements, but really getting to celebrate the achievements of all the volunteers. I love teaching. I'm not classically trained as a teacher, but kind of my greatest joy is seeing these people who really didn't have a background in science just take off in this field of study, and just the amazing discoveries that they've made, and their personal journeys as well. I find inspirational all the time, and I love that they have far surpassed me in my native bee knowledge. That's what's great for me to see. The other thing that I think is just amazing is how robust our data set is, in a short number of years, to have one of the largest data sets of native bees and their host plants in the world is just fantastic, and I think more than I ever could have hoped for the project itself. So, yeah.
Well, I remember early on, you and I, you were still with ODA, we drove to Klamath Falls, I think, and Grants Pass. And I remember we saw, especially in Grants Pass, where we recently lost Phyllis McIntosh, but, we saw that there were people in the state who really, I remember for you it was just a delight, because you hated any kind of extension that involved cartoons or pictures. You wanted people to handle real.
You still try to insert them in. It drives me crazy. I don't like cutesy stuff. Yeah.
But there were people for that. There were people who really wanted to dig deep, and you were real. I remember how excited you were.
Yes.
How pumped you were when you left those sessions.
Yeah, I get excited about the details of life and biology, and that's where my passion lies, and to be able to kind of geek out about those things with others has been a blast.
Yeah, Link, how about yourself? I mean, you've been here, you've kind of been around the program for a long time. Now you're officially in the program, and I imagine we've heard you talk to volunteers about the Master Melittologist program, and but how would you answer this?
Yeah, my proudest achievement, or our proudest achievements within the Pollinator Health Lab. Well, obviously my bias is towards all of the native bee biodiversity work that we're doing, which is, there's a lot. And I think the most valuable thing that we've developed is all of this infrastructure for the programming and the outreach and knowing how to engage people, train them quickly to a professional level, and enable our capacity to do this kind of research. It's just, not too long ago, it was just unthinkable that something like this would be possible. And so the fact that we have a Master Melittologist program with hundreds of people either in it or signed up to join, and the fact that we have people going, with bee trap lines all over the state studying, more than 1,000 flowering plant species and so on, is just, beyond my dreams. So the infrastructure, though, I think is kind of the foundation of it all, is really the valuable part, because it can be replicated in other places, in other states, in other provinces, in other countries. It could be functional all over the world where there's a volunteer capacity. So it's pretty amazing.
We really have geared up. I think about Jen's office, for example. She's got a big rack there with extension publications ready to go out in an envelope. Like, we really have the ability now that we didn't have 5 years ago to kind of quickly get information out to people, and people who are trained and know how to talk to the public. I think our volunteers are amongst the best, outreach and extension people in the nation, to be honest. And they, in many ways, will surpass me in terms of their knowledge of native bees. I feel that's a
Absolutely.
real testament.
Yeah, they're not all just students. Lots of them are high quality professionals. I always joke that they're smarter than I am by a fair degree, and in some cases that's definitely a fair assessment. So.
Yeah, I guess thinking about the one thing that we haven't spoken about, like my proud achievements for the program have been, reaching out. We do a lot of native bee work, but we have strong connections to beekeepers in the state. We serve, we've got an excellent apiculture program at OSU, but we do supplement and provide research and information to beekeepers, but also to land managers. I think we've trained more pesticide applicators on how to read a pesticide label for pollinator health anywhere in the nation. And the connections, I'm always proud that whenever we talk about bees, we can get conservation organizations, grower organizations around the table, and this seems to be productive. Like, we don't have the kind of situation where people are there's conflict. I think everybody's kind of focused on how do we do this in Oregon, which I am proud of. That's an amazing thing. All right, so talked about what we've done. So what are you kind of looking forward in the next 3 years? You've built this infrastructure. We're all jazzed and excited, and we've got volunteers that fill us with enthusiasm every day we come to work. What do you kind of see the program looking like in 3 years? Does it look like the same but bigger, or does it look the same, or you're hoping that something gets off the ground? Jen, I would imagine one thing that we've talked about for the Master Melittologist program specifically is having levels.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. I'm excited to add to the educational content of the Master Melittologist program. So we have a bunch of enthusiastic apprentices that are ready for more, and so journey and master levels that will sort of mirror what we have in the Master Beekeeper program. But I think what I'm actually looking forward to the most is seeing the students become more active in leadership positions in the program, as I keep referencing the Master Beekeeper program. But what's neat about that is that students that started maybe 5 years ago in the program are now stepping up as mentors and instructors And so at some point you reach this level where the students take the wheel more and more in the program, and so I'm excited to see that happen. It's happening already, but excited to see it grow.
I would say for myself, Sarah has been working a lot with these NRCS grants that we've been doing with land managers. We've been working with collaborators like Marcelo Moretti, our weed scientist, and Serkan Atez, our pasture scientist, and Sandy Dabano, and Chris Adams. And it strikes me that the native bee work has really opened up a lot of opportunities for, and I think this came up, Link calls this his manifesto, but in terms of like creating plant communities that are really good for pollinators and specific and targeted. And I think we've been able to create such a good bridge to land managers across Oregon. And we just need to, like, in the next 3 years, I'd like to see those dots connect a little bit more, where we kind of like seed growers are growing seed mixes for specific, it's cost effective, and the kind of pushback we've heard from some growers in terms of expense we get around, and we start to like really roll out a kind of integrated approach to habitat. I think that's been one of the things that we've done really good work around pesticides and pesticide mitigation, but the habitat piece is the tricky one. And I guess the other thing that I've been excited about is working with soil and water conservation districts, and land trusts, and I think that was something that we lacked in the first few years. We didn't have a connection to those groups, and now those connections are starting to be made, and I see us all of those things coming together in some way. That's my hope for the next 3 years.
Yeah, I would build on that too, just having better extension resources for all those different groups and industry groups and growers. That's something I'm really excited about. In the past, a lot of the pollinator recommendations were just general recommendations that were not state specific or each ecoregion specific or industry specific. And so through more and more projects, we are, I think, building our arsenal of more targeted extension materials that will actually, lead to real change on the ground for pollinator species in Oregon. And I think that's really exciting. Mm-hmm. And then for me also, again, back to just really loving the teaching aspect of extension and information for the general public is seeing some of our materials kind of trickle down to school-age children in the K through 12 age range through some of the new initiatives that we've been working on, and that's really exciting to me to see the next generation of Oregonians.
Let's be clear, you've been working on, so the coloring book, the Explore Oregon Bees coloring book, was something that you've been pushing for a long time. You collaborated with Food Hero, and suddenly there's this new avenue for us to reach children youth that we have not been able to do.
Yes, and what I think is so exciting about that work is it highlights some of those same relationships that you were talking about earlier, that the Pollinator Health Lab here has a really unique relationships both with the agricultural sector as well as soil and water conservation districts and ecological groups. And all of that information is in these resources for children at a level that they can understand, so it teaches children about the role of seed growers in, the role that bees have in growing seed crops and how that translates to our nutrition and just basic concepts about pollination and insect life history. All of that is really exciting to me because I'm a mom with small children, and I feel like a lot of this information is no longer taught to children at the level that I'd love to see it be introduced to them. And I feel like, just a love of science sets children off as such a great lifelong journey. And so I'm really excited about those resources. And again, they're at a level that I think we can all feel proud of. One of the things I love about this group is that we don't underestimate the general public to understand and be interested in scientific material, and so we have a pretty high standard for our materials here.
In the Canadian Parliament, when something like that is said, you go, here. But I would, the other thing I would say is I think this ethos kind of comes from something that you inherited before we got here. Sujaya Rao and Bill had this idea that diversified cropping systems in Western Oregon are leading to bee biodiversity, and I think that connects to the education, getting that message out to the public and getting that message out to people so that they understand the importance of diversified agricultural systems and specialty crops.
Yes. Yeah, and I think it's part of the Oregon climate here as a whole, right? We're a specialty crop state. We've said this many, many times. We have great crop diversity and crops that support a lot of our generalist pollinators, and they have a long history together doing that, and a decent history of extension research into those topics as well, and we're certainly carrying on that tradition.
All right, Link, I know you have several manifestos up your sleeve. What's your manifesto for the Pollinator Health Program for the next 3 years?
Honestly, I think the last few years we've been developing all this programming. I think...
And it's been painful to do.
Well, it's been difficult.
Yeah,
absolutely. It's been a lot of work, and so we've developed all this programming, and I would just like to see us continue to refine the various components to make them more efficient, and then enable us to work at a higher capacity. To see 200 and 500 people enrolled in our Master Melittologist program would be fantastic. They don't all have to be Bee Atlas contributors, but to have that amount of people, or that number of people being educated and trained, and a lot of them are just using the training to start their own projects in other places, and so that's really quite satisfying. With respect to the native bee plant restoration conservation narrative, that the data sets we're generating are really, really rich with respect to pollinator and plant species, and so as we roll the data out, I'm really looking forward to working with lots of different stakeholders to put that information to work in the field, which is something I've dreamt about for a long time. And of course, like a lot of these bee species and plant species aren't just, in Oregon. They're all over the western U.S. and western Canada. So that's going to be really exciting to just be able to integrate the knowledge that we've created into more decision-making, conservation action. And then selfishly, I just want to continue to add species to the Oregon bee fauna list of what we know exists here and what they're doing and where they are. And it's like every day I feel like I turn around and there's new bees to add to the Oregon State bee list, and so I find that to be particularly satisfying. So in 3 years, we're going to have lots more bees in our reference collection, lots more bees that have been barcoded so that we can, hopefully elucidate what some of their identities are. And
well, I'm glad that you raised that up, because the other thing I'll mention when this episode drops, we're right in the midst of our fundraising, and so for the Oregon Bee Atlas, and so I really encourage you. I remember we had like Gene Natter was on a call, a kind of educational seminar we were doing, and you mentioned the importance of barcoding bees, and Gene paid for the barcoding of a whole bunch of bees. It was about $5,000 or so, or
yeah, and so we've submitted a few hundred Lazulosum specimens representing maybe upwards of 75 species. There aren't really very good keys or resources available for Western U.S. or Oregon species, and so barcoding upwards of 75 different species is going to provide us with reference material. It'll help put names on some of those, and it'll just ultimately provide a lot of reference material so that we can use to compare new material coming in against those molecular or genetic references.
I was thinking also about Jerry and Judith Paul, who've actually set up a Pollinator Fund at the foundation. As sort of there's all sorts of ways to support this work, and it really does require support. I mean, I think we look to Oregon Flora as an example of a program that's been sustained over 30 years by volunteer contributions and has really provided a lot of information back to Oregonians. So if you are interested, we'll put the link in the show notes. We really would, a contribution would be really helpful to keeping everything moving around here. As you see, we got a lot of ideas. All right, let's take a quick break and then we'll come back. We do this segment, as you probably all know. You all listen to this podcast, right? All right, and we'll be right back. All right,
Book, tool,
species.
Yeah.
All right, book. All right, well, for me, the book is simple. My master's work was with Dr. Mark Winston. I still think the biology of honeybees has not been replicated. Nobody's come up with anything like it since. It is really well written. The illustrations in honeybee biology they're all hand rendered. They're really great. And so for me, the best book, still the book that I recommend to anybody getting interested in bees, if you want to be able to sit down, read something cover to cover, and have a kind of like snapshot about a species' natural history, there's not really a better book. So that's my book recommendation.
I've got one. Yeah.
What's yours, Jen? You've now looked it up. But you're typing it.
Yeah, I'm verifying the title. I love that one, The Sacred Bee.
Sacred Bee?
In Ancient Times and Folklore.
What the heck?
This one?
Yeah, I don't know it.
It's just full of
really?
ancient references to beekeeping, and that's what's really...
I've heard about it.
Yeah, I love that.
I read that for a while.
It's really cool.
Oh, it's got a picture of a skep out there with bees in some kind of medieval courtyard.
Yeah, The Sacred Bee in Ancient Times and Folklore. So, yeah, I've talked about this in previous podcasts where the thing that I love about beekeeping the most is just the sensory connections to previous generations and even ancient civilizations. So the same smell that you're smelling is, the same experience that people have had
that is cool.
through the years. And so I love books like this that tap into the cultural references of beekeeping.
That's very cool. Sarah, how about you?
Oh, well, I have the standbys and ones I've brought up before. I love Bill Stevens' The Biology and External Morphology of Bees, which I still think is an excellent resource, and I would love someday to do an updated version. I think would be a fantastic thing, actually, for this very group to put together.
Because it was like 1969 or something.
Yes, yeah, it's way out of date, especially the taxonomy needs to be updated, but still a wonderful resource. The Solitary Bees, I also think, is just really a fantastic book, again, that is very user-friendly while going into the topic of native bees across all aspects in great depth, and just brings together a lot of wonderful bee research into one resource.
And required reading for any master melinologist taking the apprentice level.
Excellent book. Yeah.
How about you, Link?
I'm just going to stick with The Bees of the World, Michener's opus.
I read it every day at breakfast. I read a section.
That's awesome. Yes. I love it. I use it as a pillow. So you use it in the morning. I use it in the evening. It's just dense with information, and I love it.
Well, there is this. Lisa Robinson has pointed out that Don Rolfs has a kind of spiral-bound, broken-up version of it that various people have gotten their hands on.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Lisa, if you're listening, Link wants one.
Yeah.
Okay, next, go-to tool. Everybody knows on the show I have this milking stool that I use for working bees, honeybees, and Lene Oving, the technician in the University of Lethbridge Bee Lab, formerly, sewed me a cushion when I left Lethbridge, and so it's got a custom cushion on it. I love that thing.
For me, McCord frame grips.
What is that?
My favorite. It's the McCord frame grip. It's this metal tool that lets you lift frames out of a hive with one hand. Unfortunately, they're not made anymore. There are different knockoffs available, but the original McCord frame grip, if you have one, hang on to it.
Dr. Mike Burgett has come into the room. We're recording a podcast, Mike. What is your go-to tool for working with bees?
Hive tool.
Hive tool. What kind of hive tool? A J grip? Those little J things that rip the...
Excuse me.
Yeah.
J grips.
Or whatever those are. Really? Okay. All right.
It was interesting, you know, Sir Edmund Hillary was a beekeeper.
Really?
Yep. And after,
I knew this.
And after he ascended Everest, the New Zealand Beekeepers Association gave him a chrome-plated hive tool engraved. And somehow it ended up in the Cornell collection.
Really?
So one day, I'd lost all my hive tools. So I went into the display case and grabbed it. And it was the first time I'd used that J-type hive tool. I thought, wow, this is much better.
Did you put it back?
Oh, yes. And carefully cleaned it.
All right. Oh, well. When we learn secrets here on PolliNation. Okay, Sarah, what's your go-to tool?
Yeah, mine are not that surprising. I always go with a good pair of forceps. They just come in handy for everything.
Yeah.
I hate soft touch tweezers. I think are worthless. You need something you can really grip things with. And then a dissecting microscope is just a fantastic tool. No matter what you're doing, I think that the microscope is great.
Fantastic. Link, what are your go-to tools?
Well, I have quite a few tools that are indispensable, but there's one that I have with me all the time, and it's a Leatherman Wingman.
What?
Which is a Leatherman Wingman tool, which is one of those little pocket tools with pliers and everything built into it, and so I use it all the time.
Incidentally, talking about tools, I still have your booster cables.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, I gotta get them back to you. Okay, last favorite bee. Mine is the honeybee. It's been the bee species that opened the doors for me. The thing I always love about honeybees is the people around honeybees, and that's why, I think that I bring that to the program every day. I love that you can go into any city in the world and find a bunch of people who work honeybees, and you can strike a conversation up with them. And I love that part. I love that they're agricultural, so that there's this connection to the ag community. A beekeeper can talk to a grower that maybe a native bee person really would have to work at. So I just love honeybees. But I love all the rest of the bees, and thanks for opening my eyes to them. But I am primarily a honeybee person. Jen, how about yourself?
For me, it's not very flashy, but I'm really learning and appreciating mason bees.
You had great success.
Great success in my home garden. I'm the steward of 2 mason bee houses, and it was a great success. But also, I have an affinity for them because they have this season of glory, which is kind of like what I have with my job. I have seasons of glory, and then I graciously retreat into the background for the rest of the year.
You're a solitary bee.
Yeah, I prefer to be in the background, unobserved, letting other people take the reins. So, yeah.
This is a rare Jen Larson sighting here on PolliNation.
Yeah, exactly.
What's yours?
Oh, I always go for the sweat bees because I think they're underappreciated. I love, that they're facultatively social. I love that they're all over everywhere. They're generalists. They're survivors. They live in, all different environments, from the inner city to the alpine habitat. I just think they're amazing, and they're, we know so little about them despite them being so common, and they're not flashy, they're not a sexy bee, so they don't get as much attention as I think they should.
I was reading Bees of the World this morning, and I learned that there's some sweat bees that will open the cells up, clean the poop out, and reseal them. It's like, holy smokes.
Yeah.
Why? I was gonna say that would be great for me too. Anyway, clean my house. All right, Link.
Oh, let's see. My favorite bee. Well, there's a lot of favorites, and they every time I learn about some new weird local species that has some strange affinity to some ugly plant, I have a new favorite bee. But I think this morning we were talking about a genus called Meliturgia that I came across in Central Asia, and the males, these are like large andrenids that behave like Anthophora, and so the males are territorial and fast flying, and I don't know what plant they were visiting, but they invariably had, half a dozen of these Pollinia that were stalked and stuck to their clypeus. And so they had these little kind of dingleberries hanging off the front of their lip, flying around, being all, So for today, my favorite bee is Meliturgia.
Well, fantastic, guys. I look forward to the next 5 years of Pollinator Health, and hopefully, could you imagine 400 episodes?
Oh, yeah.
I can't.
Yeah.
And more episodes of PolliNation. Thanks, everybody, for listening.
Thank you so much for listening. The show is produced by Quinn, Sin, and Neil, who's a student here at OSU in the New Media Communications program, and the show wouldn't even be possible without the support of the Oregon Legislature, the Foundation for Food and Agricultural Research, and Western SARE. Show notes with links mentioned on each episode are available on the website, which is at pollinationpodcast.oregonstate.edu. I also love hearing from you, and there's several ways to connect with me. The first one is you can visit the website and leave an episode-specific comment. You can suggest a future guest or topic, or ask a question that could be featured in a future episode. But you can do the same things on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook by visiting the Oregon Bee Project. Thanks so much for listening, and see you next week.